Otherwise, how are you? You're good? Ganesh went fine? Huh? He dipped himself properly? After all the kind of propaganda that we have, the stature of Ganesha has been increased in the prime locations. We were, I think, in the last class doing with constructive period. I remember I stopped by saying that we'll have to do with tribal Panchashil. That was the time coinciding with the emergence of the concept of tribal Panchashil. So what we would be doing today is we will have, that conclusion I have to make of the constructive period. What we will be looking for in that time is government had tried to announce its own policy towards tribal administration and welfare, and hence there was a combination coming up, anthropologists and the government trying to come together, devise a plan for the tribal welfare, and a policy of tribal Panchashil was put forth. This was one we'll have to look at. And second thing, I have written there in the fourth point, this is also a time when fieldwork traditions have emerged, so we will have to take stock of good number of writings, good number of field studies. So this is all, as I have said to you in the last class, is going to be very highly fact-based kind of a thing. How you remember, how you memorize, that's your problem. The reason why I have placed this particular chapter towards the last phase of your course is, by this time you are already exposed to, you are already conversant with a lot of names, books and terminologies, etc. And hence I don't think there will be a difficulty in following up with what we are going to do. After doing this, meaning we will look at constructive period, we will also go to the analytical or the critical period as they were talking about. That brings us to a larger conclusion of evolution of anthropology in India, if at all that's a big question that is asked. Apart from this, we will pick up individual thinkers. In individual thinkers, I would want to do with two people in today's class from India. That is, one is Majumdar, on whom we would give a briefing and we would make a note. The second thinker is S.C. Dubey. I will simply be explaining about him. You would take that as an assignment, that is S.C. Dubey. Because every thinker I will not be able to dictate and do stuff. We will give an idea, and then from the material that is given to you, you'll generate your answer. The third thinker will be, I am picking them up from the British anthropologists, that is Elwin and Heimendorf, both of them together. But I am really not sure whether all four thinkers will be done today. Three thinkers for sure I would want to do in today's class. Okay? Tomorrow we will be focusing on one big question that is a very highly expected one. Contributions of British administrator anthropologists, or maybe perhaps the question can be very open-ended, such as impact of or influence of British anthropology on Indian anthropology. This is a very open-ended kind of a one, so we will be taking up that question, namely impact of British anthropology on Indian anthropology. And if at all I am leaving Heimendorf for you, that we will be doing. We will also be having a brief look at Madam Leela Dubey. Notes is already provided to you in the booklet, but then I'll have to introduce her to the class. Leela Dubey. We have other female anthropologists. We have Iravati Karve and good lot of female thinkers that, logically I would actually want to bring the evolution related topics to a conclusion tomorrow, taking the 2 hours of extra session. Okay? I am there. So, let me take you to this one. Right aside head there. Tribal Panchashil. Tribal Panchashil We are dealing with constructive period, है ना? Tribal Panchashil. The constructive period led to the government of India spelling out its policy towards tribal named Tribal Panchashil. Academically, it is integrationalism in practice. It is integrationalism in practice. Sir, otherwise I would have simply given 2 or 3 statements on tribal Panchashil, but because on tribal Panchashil itself separate questions are being asked, it makes sense to take stock of the details there. But otherwise, if you are writing a question on evolution of anthropology in India, we don't expect the student to write all the details about tribal Panchashil. Okay? Make a note. Tribal Panchashil, number 1. People should develop along the lines of their own genius and continue there. Imposition of alien values on them shall be avoided. Secondly, tribal rights over land and forests shall be respected. Thirdly, team of tribal representatives should be trained in their own administration and planning for development. Fourthly, over administration of tribals should be avoided through multiplicity of schemes. Fifthly, results of tribal development initiatives shall be judged not based on the money spent, but by the change in the human character and culture of the tribes. Give a quick reading. This you already know, but still, the 5 major things. No avoidance of alien culture, let them develop by themselves. Protection of rights, teams for self-governance and administration planning, etc. Over administration, and you have how you are going to evaluate the impact of developmental programs. Okay, come now. Take the next point. Emergence of fieldwork traditions. Emergence of fieldwork traditions. Write the next slide head there. Emergence of fieldwork traditions. We are writing about the constructive phase of Indian anthropology. Emergence of fieldwork traditions in Indian anthropology. Anthropologists like Elwin and Heimendorf introduced core fieldwork methodologies of European anthropology into Indian anthropology, such as participant and non-participant observation, non-participant observation, different kinds of interviews, long duration stay among tribes, visual anthropology, a restudy method, etc. Their impact was visibly felt. In the writings of Majumdar, Vidyarthi and Dubey. Indian anthropologists used a combination of fieldwork methods, and concepts of European trainers, For example, Majumdar's problem-oriented ethnograph, the Ho, incorporated, right in quotes, concept of disappearance of culture traits, and disappearance of useful traits, unquote, due to culture contact. He presented accounts of youth dormitories youth dormitories and peripheral markets, youth dormitories and peripheral markets as useful traits that disappeared due to culture stress. Achha, go to the list of questions that you had been making. In the early days of your course, just check out whether we have written peripheral markets in that list. Peripheral markets. And one other question you should be adding there is youth dormitories. Youth dormitories and peripheral markets. How many you must have listed out so far? If at all you counted, you have a count? 50, yeah? So, right now. Youth dormitories were examined by Heimendorf, Vidyarthi and Majumdar among Gonds. Peripheral markets of Birhor by Majumdar, Khasa market and family systems and youth dormitories by Heimendorf. Right in the next paragraph. The constructive phase thus introduced several European traditions into Indian anthropology, leading to a replica of categorization of content into branches such as biological anthropology, socio-cultural anthropology, and development anthropology. Volumes of native literature emerged by the end of the phase, such as, write in quotes, The Changing Hoe. You remember this book? The Changing Hoe of the Singhbhum. The Changing Hoe of the Singhbhum by Majumdar. Marriage and Family in Mysore. By Srinivas. Hindu Methods of Tribal Absorption Hindu Methods of Tribal Absorption by N.K. Bose. By N.K. Bose. Among different writers, Majumdar and N.K. Bose focused on impact of mainstream on the tribals. For Majumdar, industrialization and urbanization led to a permanent change in the tribal character. N.K. Bose focused at, right in quotes, assimilation of tribals, resulting in tribe caste continuum. Sir, how many of you had given the test? I think I received about 6 papers. बाकियों का क्या हुआ? I think it was always better to have a test in the class rather than asking you to write at home, because कम से कम ना मुंह दिखाने के लिए तो आ जाएंगे. But in fact, no, I expected a little more. And one positive comment I got from the crowd is that test paper is damn easy. ये भी अच्छा लगा. Maybe some of you must have thought that अब इतना easy paper क्या लिखना है? लिखेंगे तो tough वाला ही लिखेंगे. You're all good, right? You're all upset with me for some reason? You're all good? No? I'm in no way responsible for the day before yesterday's thing. I will do my bit to do the damage control. अब उसके बारे में ना अब don't have that long faces and wooden faces with me. मगर next test जब होगा, that is going to be your 5th test. I would want to have a cumulative big one. I will be physically present in the class with you. देखते हैं कितना अच्छा लिखते हो. Physically I will be there. I will be invigilating your this thing. और अलग से न्योता देंगे. I will see to it that every one of you get a hard copy of invitation to write the exam. और class में लिखेंगे, ठीक है? So that is going to be a cumulative test. I will be announcing the syllabus well in advance. A lot of paper 2 will be there and some bit of paper 1, etc. And उसके बाद क्योंकि बार-बार मौका नहीं मिलेगा मुझे आपको देखना लिखते हुए, so I will try to do that. You're all good, fine. Something happened yesterday. कुछ नया war तो नहीं शुरू किया ना? PM साहब ने नहीं, kind of. अब मुझे नहीं पता. Morning I did not see the newspaper. Suddenly ऐसा भी हो सकता है. Suddenly ना दिल बोला कि किसी और kind of analytical period. और एक था sir. Morning I had a bad talk with somebody. अभी देखो कुछ भी problem हो, बीमार पड़ते हो, I mean understandable. But when there is a problem, you make it a point to inform. अभी मुझे समझ नहीं आता 1.5 महीना तक क्या करते होंगे. 1.5 महीने में ये कॉल नहीं किया जा सकता, ये एक मेल नहीं किया जा सकता कि see I am not able to attend this kind of stuff and try to see to it that you accommodate me somewhere kind of. अब 1.5-2 महीने के बाद आप उठते हो नींद से, hibernation. And then you suddenly remember that I paid for this particular course which is almost coming to an end. Suddenly you saw a message somewhere that class is coming to an end, and now you come up and this is very irresponsible kind of a thing. माना कि आप बीमार हो, I do understand, but then इतना भी नहीं कि आप एक फोन भी नहीं कर सकते हो. और this is not really. And अगर आपके friends हो ये impression में होंगे कि बाद में हम कुछ कर लेंगे, मैं तो कुछ करने वाली नहीं हूँ. This you inform to them. Agar, no, if at all you had given an intimation well in advance कि हमको कुछ कर लो, I will do that, but otherwise I am not responsible. ठीक है? Right. Analytical period. This phase experienced a domain shift of the discipline from exclusive tribal studies to a combination of rural and tribal studies. American influence was visible due to the introduction of culture personality studies, folk urban studies, study of political structures, national character studies, right in the brackets, applied as caste and regional personality studies, bracket close, that formed the central theme of American anthropology. Keep writing in bullet points. Due to the influence of Oscar Lewis, Lewis. This name we have heard before. Oscar Lewis, Giethelsteed, you can see that on the board, Giethelsteed and Carstairs, Indian anthropologists, applied culture personality approach to understand behavior, culture personality approach to understand the behavior of individuals from specific castes and regions. Carstairs studied the royal families of Western India to examine continuation of political power with the Kshatriya groups despite a shift to democratic polity. In the post-1950s, right in the next point there, in the post-1950s, a continued rigor was experienced in village and caste studies, with the writings of M. N. Srinivas, Guha, and Risley. The most popular books of the time include A Religion and Society, Among the Coorgs of South India. A Religion and Society Among the Coorgs of South India, M. N. Srinivas. Social Change in Modern India. Social Change in Modern India by M. N. Srinivas. Caste and Other Essays. Caste and Other Essays by M. N. Srinivas. Continue writing there. The writings of Guha. The writings of Guha revealed a continuation of colonial race-based writings leading to categorization of people based on racial character. अच्छा, ये क्वेश्चन लिखिए लिस्ट ऑफ क्वेश्चंस में. We will come back to discuss about this when we go to caste. That is, draw parallels between race and caste as mechanisms of discrimination. Continue that question. I repeat, draw parallels between race and caste as mechanisms of discrimination. Present your case for replacing or not replacing the concept of race by caste while dealing with India in international conventions. The later is actually a thing between Indian government and the UN. UN says that we are equating race with the caste, and then whatever rules that they are framing to in handling race, they can be equally valid for the caste also. Government of India says nothing doing, you cannot do that. That's a different one. This is a different thing. So that's what I mean by present your case. When you're presenting your case, I have actually put it open there. Either you support it or you oppose it. So how you are going to present your arguments, that is one thing. Come down, sir. Right, in the next point, in the constructive, in the analytical phase. The phase introduced anthropology as a discipline that is useful despite culture contact and disappearance of the core content of anthropology, that is, simple and tribal societies. Anthropology's struggle to prove its necessity formed the crux of analytical phase. According to Vidyarthi, apparently, though the simple was getting assimilated into the complex, the need of anthropology continues to exist as long as multiculturalism, races, classes, social stratification, exists in the society. For Vidyarthi, in an attempt to retain its position of utility, during analytical phase, the discipline evolved through different subdisciplines, branches, and interdisciplinary approaches. Yoginder Singh's modernization of Indian tradition, dealt with the new content of Indian anthropology, that is, impact of several mainstream religions on the tribals, and the new interconnections between different great tradition religions. Continue writing there. Writers like S.C. Dubey experimented with a multidisciplinary approach in designing and evaluating rural development programs. His work at Shamirpet, brought together experts from sociology, political science, anthropology, forestry, pressure groups, people's representatives to deliver developmental programs. Writers like Vidyarthi, Chattopadhyaya, N.K. Bose, used anthropological approaches to deal with the field situations. For example, Vidyarthi's nature man spirit complex was an effort to identify reasons behind Mahler's resistance. You remember this? Yeah, I'm sure. Mahler's resistance for resettlement and rehabilitation. In the context of mining and industrialization. Right, the last one there. In the field of economic anthropology, the phase introduced substantivist approach as an extension of tribal Panchashil. Right, the next one. The post-1990s. Vidyarthi's anthropological history did not deal specifically with post-1990s. Surjit Sinha in his History of Indian Anthropology traced post-1990 developments according to him. In this phase, Indian anthropology failed to realize the greater heights of European and American anthropology. It is generally blamed to the general poverty, lack of patronage, and disinterest among professionals and academicians to study culture. With the government encouraging scientific disciplines, social sciences, including anthropology, lost their importance. On the other hand, globalization, active interventions from global NGOs, gave rise to sociological projects hence the branches of urban anthropology, slum anthropology, visual anthropology, and subcultural anthropology. Right in the next paragraph. In the contemporary Indian anthropology, unlike the British, different branches thrive on a competition and a disconnect. Scientific disciplines, scientific branches such as physical and archaeological anthropology claim a higher status than socio-cultural and linguistic anthropology. The lack of integrationalism among different branches has been a great impediment to anthropology's progress. Right, the last statement there. Emulating the European and American practices, certain organizations outside the traditional realm of anthropology started employing anthropological approaches and content. For example, DRDO, National Institute of Nutrition, NIN, National Institute of Nutrition, Indian Air Force have been using anthropometry for a cross-national, cross-cultural adaptation. Cross-national and cross-cultural adaptation, that's where we are. Sir, in your book, page 103, huge lot of thinkers are actually mentioned there. So the idea is open, wherein from 110, if you could see, this particular article incorporated very many thinkers. 108 देखिएगा, 108 analytical phase. Though you are not reading the whole thing now, just glance, you can see tens of writers there. In the brackets, the societies they have studied. So, I mean, it depends on your agility to incorporate the number of facts that you can. And as you get into the next pages, 112, there's a special information on thinkers like Hutton. Keep flipping through your pages. You have good lot of other thinkers. Some thinkers we will take up, but the rest of the ones you will be reading from here. For example, 129, Iravati Karve, there's much more that we will be incorporating in our discussion about her. तो ये है, I mean, I didn't say anything. You may ask me, which thinkers to study, which not to study. A general idea of the stalwarts is necessary, but based on that year's significance, we will be notifying. See, these are the thinkers that you will have to study. Standard, some people are there, like Vidyarthi, Majumdar, and then you have Dubey, S.C. Roy, kind of people. They are indispensable. If examiner doesn't find any anniversaries, any golden jubilee, silver jubilee kind of things that year, he might go and ask questions on a traditional basis. Otherwise, he would pick up based on whatever is vital that year. So we will begin with some of the Indian thinkers. You have to keep in mind one of the statements that we have said earlier. You can actually recall who said that. The writer said that Indian anthropology did not come up with its own variant, own personality, but then it was only simply imitating the European way of doing. On the other hand, the thinker also said that it is a rarity among Indian thinkers that they are sticking to one specific approach. On the other hand, most of the thinkers, they try to use all the available approaches. They're not sticking to one, but they are using more than one approaches, or many of them that are already existing. So they are not subscribing to one specific approach. This comment we have already made in one of your classes earlier. Let me give you a brief idea before we go to the thinkers. You are all there, sir? Huh? Be happy, be smiling, no, don't be angry with me, don't be upset. So like how we try to trace the evolution of anthropology, we also can see the difference in the nature of the thinkers. Like how, as somebody said that the kind of rulers are based on what kind of rulers that you expect. You have some expectations. Similarly, the expectations are there everywhere. Whether you talk about your familial relations, your relations in the school with the teacher, you will get the teachers, you will get the rulers, may not be the parents. Whatever you want, you get it from there. It's all the reciprocal thing. We find that there. We find here that the nature of them was changing from time to time. Sir, in the early days of Indian anthropology, as you could see there, towards the end of the first phase, the formative phase, towards the end, we find the emergence of Indian thinkers. You remember? We have spoken about one monograph called the Munda, written by, don't say BYE now, by S.C. Roy. Sir, these are the landmark things. When I say that this topic is very rugged and fact-oriented, if you are not writing the names of the thinkers, books, etc., it is a wasteful exercise to attempt the question. Agar aapke paas facts nahi hai, don't touch the question. But they score very well. These questions score very well. Every year, at least 2 questions come from here. Examiner thinks that by default you'll remember these. Sir, there are certain communities in the country. I'm using the word community or the locality or the geography. There are certain localities, geographies, communities in the country who right from the beginning, the moment they are born, their target is to get into IAS only. Their target is to get into IAS only. I'm not naming specifically, but then those communities, suppose you say that aap unko telephone directory thama do. Telephone directory thama do, bolo ki subah tak isko padh lena, this is important to get into IAS. They will do that. They will memorize the entire telephone directory and come back to you. We are only asking you to memorize few names. If you are not able to do that, then. So I was saying that towards the end of the first phase, if we have seen the emergence of the first anthropologists in India, those first lot of people, they had maintained those credentials of, see, I was trained by somebody, and hence I would be having this particular approach as my teacher had, and I would be following the research methodologies as were guided to me. That was the first phase, in the sense that people like Majumdar or S.C. Dubey or Vidyarthi, if you look at those people, or Srinivas, they were sticking to particular research methodologies, particular methods or particular theoretical approaches. But if you see the later phases, that kind of affinity doesn't exist. That kind of affinity doesn't exist. So you try to bring together various kinds of approaches and try to prepare your own broth. That doesn't take you anywhere. Nevertheless, what had become popular was anthropological approach. Now I will tell you something about this. Even when somebody tells you that how do you examine anthropologically this particular thing, many times you do not know whether anthropology can be applied there or not. Say for example, abhi ye chal raha hai. Ganesha is going and coming and people are doing all kinds of things. And suppose somebody asks you, how do you analyze anthropologically this kind of a practice, this kind of a procession, and the kind of whatever environmental thing, I am not getting into the controversies, whatever environmental things going on. Okay. You haven't come across any particular write-up on this. And hence you do not know whether you can apply anthropological approach there or not. Whenever you are using this word, you will have to remember two things. Number one, by calling something anthropological, by examining something anthropologically, what it means is you will have to give importance to different viewpoints of the people who are parties into that. What do you call this approach, this concept? Cultural relativism. Cultural relativism is that approach which gives importance to every viewpoint associated with the people who are parties into it. Okay, so whenever an episode is given to you, an event is given to you, or a situation is presented to you, asking you to provide an anthropological perspective, what you should do is, you have to weigh, you have to value every perspective that is there among the people who are parties to it. Okay, this is number one. Second thing is, you will have to look at how the cross-cultural relations are. You will have to see how the cross-cultural relations are. Or maybe perhaps whether that particular situation is existing in its own personality, in its own cultural isolation, or is there something like a cross-cultural impact on it? Are you there, sir? I am trying to generalize this and tell, because you are going to get this stuff many times in the future. Suppose you go to the interviewer might pick up a situation for you and tell you that examine this from an anthropological perspective. How you do that? The first thing is fine. When it comes to the second one, I was saying that you try to examine whether that cultural entity is existing in its own isolation, or is there any cross-cultural impact, and because of which its basic nature was changing. Are you there? So if we are looking at that, what is going on around, what are the cross-cultural impacts on the so-called the practice of Ganesh Nimajjan? रात में तो देखे होंगे, गए होंगे. When Ganesha was taking a plunge into the pool to swim, never to get out, Buddha there was trying to stop, saying that no, please don't come. I have become lifeless by standing in this pool of dirty water. But he doesn't listen. Cross-cultural impact. सोचिएगा इसके बारे में, still there is time. That is what is the meaning of anthropological approach, giving importance to every other view, and then finally trying to a conclusion. Whether you are using an interpretative model, whether you are using a functionalist perspective, based on whatever approach you are following, the beauty is that you can follow any approach. There is no single approach that is called a valid approach in anthropology. There are different approaches. You can follow any one there, any theoretical approach. You can be historical, you can be functional, you can be structural, you can be post-structural, post-modern, whatever. ठीक है, sir. So you have that flexibility. But then one other thing is, whenever you talk about cross-cultural impacts, etc., what you will have to keep in mind, number 3, is to what extent the strata in the society is trying to address the people at the very low social strata. Are you there? This becomes the third principle. When you say apply anthropological approach, the third principle is to what extent the lowest in the social strata are being taken care by the ones that are there in the upper strata. And that is where it becomes something close to your administrative ethics, if at all you follow administrative ethics. Taking care of the lowest one in that social strata becomes the administrative ethic. That's where, because this question keeps on coming up, where exactly I can use anthropology in general studies or administration. This is what is the anthropological approach. Are you there? So any kind of general thing. Let me take here. I was saying that the earliest thinkers were following those kind of academic practices of presenting their views from one theoretical approach, presenting their views based on some kind of fieldwork methods in which they were trained, etc. In the contemporary times, we do not find such kind of exclusivity. And people say that when so many approaches are there, each approach has got its own utility, why not we use all of them, and hence we are using. Take it. Now, I am taking you on that note to this particular popular thinker called Dr. D.N. Majumdar. And as we have done in anthropological theory earlier, I should do here as well. Whenever we are coming up with, so if at all you forgot what we have done in thought, thinkers, whenever we come across any thinkers, you remember we said that we have to know their basic background. Then we said maybe perhaps the kind of literary sources they produced, the literature, maybe the essays written by them, or books written by them, books edited by them, or if at all they have come up with any journals. Then we must know what are the field works they have done, and maybe perhaps if at all you know the reason for the field work. You must know their theoretical approach. We must be incorporating in our write-up the positions held by the thinker, meaning as a head of some particular organization, etc. And maybe perhaps the contemporary relevance of his or her work and writings. Those should form part of the contributions of any thinker. Basic background, literature, like the essays, books written by them, edited by them, journals, if at all they are involved with any, field works conducted by them, and the reason why they have conducted only those studies, if at all specific reasons are there, like Mahler has a reason. Theoretical approaches, positions held by them in any organizations, and contemporary relevance. So certain things seem to be a repetition of what I have said earlier, but I have to say this, that whenever we are writing about any thinker, we expect you to give your overall opinion or comment in the opening of your answers. And that is where I always look for some kind of superlatives in your answers in the beginning there. They may look to be dramatic, but it's fine. You will have to go for some kind of superlatives which are, which are generally accepted by the readers. That I would leave it to you. Now coming to this man Majumdar, I have written a good lot of books there of him. These books you scribble, because we will not be dictating the books later. We will be talking about them. Tribe in Transition, A Fortune of Primitive Tribe, Races and Cultures of India, Caste and Communication, Social Contours, Introduction to Social Anthropology. I know by now you have understood that we will not take up the questions such as whether to remember so many books or not. I can also understand the suffocation that you go through. Because when your senior was suggesting the subject to you, that the subject is easy to score, he also must not have studied the entire subject. He also was talking to you out of some kind of a random feeling that he has got in the midnight. Now, after entering, you are so suffocated, you neither can stay nor can get out. The kind of accidental marriage that has happened. I am actually waiting for the talk to come. The talk dealing with the meaning of your existence. Whether you are the product of maybe matter plus time plus chance, or there is something else. That's where we will be talking about the topic of religion, I think, towards the last week of your course. So there are some people who are used for comparisons with Indian thinkers. Like, see, so far, whatever we have done in anthropological theory, it is very easy to remember Boas. We remember Boas as somebody who had dealt with every branch of the discipline. He had done field work, he had done writings on every branch of the discipline. Of course, when we deal with this the day after tomorrow, when we deal with human growth and development, we will once again be bringing Boas. And it has been a fancy in Indian anthropology to give those kind of titles. Titles are something that we take very importantly, very, what I should say, maybe in letter and spirit we take. अभी देखो, casually in one of the early discussions I must have said, and I generally must have said that Taylor can be seen as a father of anthropology. And I remember on the same, as a continuation of the statement, I remember to say that don't look for mother also. So I have said on one occasion that Taylor can be seen as a father of anthropology. अब किसी ने लिखा है कि you said like this. I read somewhere. जब वो you कहते हैं ना हर बात बात पे कहते हैं कि तू क्या है kind of. अब तू में बात करने लगते हैं. English is that language where you cannot actually understand तू तुम और आप में तो पता नहीं चलता. But then थोड़ा सा वो दिख जाता है ना. So तुमने ऐसे कहा कि class में this is the one, but I read somewhere that it was the Boas who was something else. He's actually the father of, अब किसके बाप हो मुझे क्या करना है. UPSC will not ask you a question, whose father is whom. Though paternity diagnosis is there, those, they are the loose kind of things that we try to give in respect of those thinkers. Don't really go by that. मुझे ये मायूसी भी होती है when I see some UGC questions. UGC questions में कभी-कभी ये भी पूछते हैं father of American anthropology, father of Indian anthropology. अब क्या करना है, to what extent you are functional, that is important. When Malinowski says kinship terminologies are not more than an algebra. X and Y's do not matter unless otherwise those X and Y's are doing some kind of a function to you or not. So do not get into all that. Even while you are writing answers to these, don't search for them. Nevertheless, Majumdar was somebody who was actually compared to people like Boas, because this man was also trying to do with several sub-branches within anthropology. He was one of the earliest anthropologists of India. And hence he also wanted to see to it that every branch thrives like how the European anthropology with different branches is thriving. And in the process, he was trying to do several field works. He was picking up several tribal communities, mainstream communities, trying to work on them. But generally what happens is when you are trying to initiate things, you may not be having that kind of a sophistication. You may fumble on many occasions. And that was the problem we see in him. For example, if you see the last book there, Introduction to Social Anthropology, this is actually a book that we suggest to undergraduates as a regular textbook. Many of the universities, especially for the BA people, we suggest the Introduction to Social Anthropology as a regular book, not as a reference one, a very small, cute looking one. The only reason why we do not suggest it to UPSC, number one, is the language issue there. I mean, don't get me wrong, but then the book has many examples from his own fieldwork, but then you find several mistakes therein, I mean, grammatical and other kinds of spellings, etc. So, not comfortable to read. Nevertheless, everything that he is writing there is based on his own field references. That is the classic thing with him. And I try to present his write-up in those major heads. I remember, now you have written many times the definition of race, the definition of race. And we said that Majumdar's definition looks to be a safe one, and then that is more or less followed by many people these days. You remember? Definition of race? Kallu dinchoddu. Kallallo kallu petti cheppandi. You remember? No? Race? Achha, you remember we studied race in the class? Oh, great. I think I should ask right questions. And what you studied in race? Racial classifications, great. Which thinkers were there? Risley was there, Guha was there, and Haddon, oh great. Sarkar also? You did in the class Sarkar? No, adi ila ante meer class lo leru anamata. We said Sarkar has to be done from your own note. Now, I was saying that this man was trying to introduce several new things, including, I have written something there. He had come up with a concept called MARC, MARC, Man, Area, Resources and Cooperation. And that's where he was trying to give some ideas on ecological anthropology also. Now, before we actually write down anything about this man, I said few things. One, he was trying to deal with every sub-branch of anthropology. Secondly, he was trying to introduce something original from Indian anthropology. And the original may be giving the concepts, original may be coming up with his own applications, original may be dealing with some new problem that the simple societies are experiencing. The general practice is, if I want you to write something, నేను ముందే చెప్తాను, I tell in advance, ఇది రాసుకో బాబు, ఇది రాసుకున్న తర్వాత మాట్లాడుకుందాం అని. అబ్బే, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'll tell you. Though I have already said once, just before I stopped for you to write down, man, area, resources and cooperation. How was my son, by the way? It's good? ఇప్పుడు గుడ్ అని చెప్పడానికి కూడా తలకాయ దించుకుని నేను ఏమైనా అమ్మాయిని చూసి చెప్పు బాబు ఎలా అని అడగలేదు కదా, అలా సిగ్గుపడతారు. I thought you will give him some guidance. UPSC कैसे prepare करना है kind of a thing. May I go now? Done with this? Sir, there are these three people. I'll have to talk a bit about them, then we will write about this man. Sir, comparison-based questions are a commonality in this subject. 2017, if at all you go back and see the list of questions, you find one question, comparison of Majumdar and LP Vidyarthi. देखिए, तो 4th chapter, paper 2. Which year was that? 18, 17, 16. Comparison. Contributions of Vidyarthi and Majumdar to the study of Indian tribes. Sir, whenever we have to answer about a thinker, you should know their core area of study. In that question, he is already making it clear that, see, I want you to write about their contributions to the study of tribes. I don't think you will ask a 15 marker if one of them did not do anything about tribe. I know. Say for example, I modify the question, LP Vidyarthi and MN Srinivas explain how they have contributed, compare how they have contributed to the study of Indian tribes. The question doesn't stand, because Srinivas' contributions majorly are towards non-tribal societies. Though very rarely he incorporated tribal examples, most of his study was in the mainstream society. So you will have to know the core. So if at all I am taking these four thinkers, Vidyarthi, Majumdar, S. C. Dubey and M. N. Srinivas. Okay. These four thinkers they can be picked up for individual questions and for the comparative questions as well. So the one that is given in your exam is these two. He was mostly with the tribal studies. This was a combination of tribe plus caste. He was mostly doing caste plus related entities in caste. Dubey's focus was on political studies. As a part of it, he was mostly to do with the caste. So as you can see there, we have Vidyarthi with mostly the tribal societies under study. Majumdar was having a combination. Srinivas was mostly with the caste and mainstream. And Dubey was to do with the caste majorly. Or we see that this one can actually be called somebody dealing with village studies. They were more or less contemporaries, or 10 years this side or that side. Because when we talk in terms of millions of years, 5, 10 years is okay. All of them were trained by people outside India. Mostly by the British anthropologists. So based on who is training them, their approach was decided. And if at all we go by their own writings, by the way they acknowledge their tutors, we can very clearly indicate Majumdar from the functionalism of Malinowski, Dubé from the structuralism, from the social structural school of R.C. Brown. So these are the two people coming from R.C. Brown. This one, Malinowski, and this one basically doing with culture contact, diffusionism. So he gives his credentials to Rivers. So that's where he talks about how cultures are getting modified, how diffusionism is resulting in particular changes in culture, etc. If at all we go by the style of ethnographic writing, all these four, with an exception, of course, there's an exception here, they were mostly following ethnographic writings with complete cultural description. Whereas Dubé was not giving complete ethnographic work. He seemed to be following part study approach. So it is very common for us to see particular names of the tribe or caste, etc., and we see almost the entire ethnological, ethnographical writing there. But that man, Dubé, was picking up not simply the culture group, but which specific entity he would be studying. That also he tries to pick up. Are you there? So he might pick up writing on rituals, he might pick up writing on the political systems. Out of everything else, he was giving importance to the study of political systems. And his examination was truly from the Brown's perspective, like how he was trying to indicate to us general particular social structure, and how the people's roles are changing, statuses are changing, all that becomes the fashion of Dubé. But one common thread in them is all of them were in some way or the other involved with Government of India's activities, Government of India's developmental activities, whether in the mainstream population or in the tribal population. You're there. We don't call him symbolic anthropologist. We don't call him because the nature is very different. He is not trying to say that, see, this one particular symbol is explaining entire culture. No. He is focusing only on one entity, mostly the political system, and to some extent rituals, etc., and trying to describe them alone. And he tries to see what goes into that political system. Out of these, if at all I have to see good friends and foes, Majumdar and Dubey seem to be, looking east and west. Because whenever Srinivas tries to come up with any new concept, Dubey is there to give a critical appraisal. We don't call it a constructive, but then we try to present that as a constructive criticism only. Out of these people, Vidyarthi is seen as somebody who is an action anthropologist. You remember that comparison we gave, applied and action anthropology. Meer leru class lo. You remember? Who remembers? Can I see the hands? I won't ask you to explain action and applied anthropology. Oh, great. So others were not there literally for me in the class. So now I won't go back to explain all that. Vidyarthi can be seen as an action anthropologist, whereas all the others form part of applied anthropology. This you keep in mind. So whenever you are comparing, you will have to see, for example, that year's question Vidyarthi versus Majumdar was there. You will have to go into method of research and whether they are writing problem-oriented ones, whether they are trying to write on how the mechanism of diffusion was occurring. Because one other commonality we find is all of them were coming into picture when India was getting independence, and then Government of India was trying to come up with its own policies. One common thread that takes all of them together is Nehru himself. If at all we go by the closeness to the Prime Minister, Dubey seems to be slightly away from the rest of the people, because we see that certain important positions were actually given, to either Majumdar or LP Vidyarthi, and in one other case to S.C. Dubey. But then Srinivas was somebody who did not hold any such positions, in spite of the fact that it is said that he was being consulted by the Prime Minister, but he did not hold any specific positions. If we go to Dubey, he seemed to have done service with some kind of things like maybe the very prestigious community development program, etc. So that seems to be a commonality, working in the early days of independence and trying to devise developmental programs and try to give their own ideas behind them. That's where we get into him. Just have a look at this. Yeah. This is something that we take very, very prestigiously. Look at the top. Proceedings of Second Indian Statistical Congress, 1939, Lahore. And that is where those three people came together. Chattopadhyaya, we have discussed about him in some of the tribal welfare related ones. He was a great critic of government's tribal welfare initiatives. Mahalanobis you know pretty well, hai na? Yeah? Ala annarandi. You really stabbed me multiple times in my back. Stabbing antene venaka nunchi, but ikkada nenu nokki vakkanistunanu. Anyways, if you don't know Mahalanobis, I don't know how to build that, but then this picture, this article, as it reads, application of statistical methods in anthropometry. It's a very cool combination of somebody who was a statistician like Mahalanobis and Majumdar, who was a physical anthropologist. I mean, because of this situation, I'm calling him physical anthropologist. Elsewhere, he has another robe to wear. And you have Chattopadhyaya, who came up with several field-level references from various culture groups. So technically, there are two anthropologists. One is a statistician. And these three people were involved in different census operations as well. And this actually shows that anthropologists were at work before and after independence. The same lot of people were taken into confidence by the first Prime Minister. So when time permits, you can actually browse through. This article anyway I will provide to you, that's a different story. But then I would want you to see the proceedings of that particular Lahore conference and which all people were talking, what they were talking. Though the conference was on statistics, there was a lot of reading on cultural stuff. Many papers were presented on cultural stuff. And that was where we see that good lot of anthropologists were trying to present their papers. People were trying to talk on what should be the statistical methods to be used in the government. You have a department, you have a department dealing with the statistics. Which one? Ministry of, what's that? No? Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. What do they do? Meeredannar sir. Central Statistical Organization, CSO. Central Statistical Organization. Achha, any document that you have read from CSO or Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation? SSO. NSSO, oh great, NSSO. National Standard Sample Survey Organization, National Sample Survey Organization. NSSO is there, CSO is there, these two are part of one particular ministry. Which document? NSSO ठीक है, National Sample Survey Organization, आप organization की बात बता रहे, any document that you have read from them? एक बार Google करना, NSSO's documents, so that we know. Many times we read things even without knowing who is writing. जैसा कि क्लास में नोट्स जो बनता है, आप पढ़ते हो without knowing who has written. NSSO's documents. Tribal data, great. When they try to submit this paper, annual tribal welfare, poverty estimates, poverty. अगर आपने economy शायद पढ़ी होगी, NSSO and CSO, when I talk about this, regular estimates of poverty, regular estimates of GDP and the patterns therein, everything comes up from there. You have been reading all that stuff. And see, God forbid, and you might be posted in the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Though we have dedicated services such as statistical service, we have. But then ऐसा हो भी सकता है, luck इतने जोर से मारेगा आपको bad luck की तरह कि you might go and end up in the department Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. You would be writing the stuff only, like India yearbook लिख रहे हो बैठ के, so that your juniors can study, or you are trying to analyze the facts and kind of things. But then see, every department and ministry uses some kind of statistical analysis or the other, because everywhere where money is being spent, you have statistics to be generated. And this is the conference wherein government was talking about, 1939, mind it, they were talking about how different ways of statistics can be used in order to prepare the documents. Thankfully, the same things we have been following after that. Even today, even after 70 years, we still follow the same kind of data preparation. You might be having several technical tools, but the core is the same. This is from where it actually starts. So, sir, in one of the documents I have mentioned this, role of anthropologists in census. You remember? I have already given that in the booklet also. Role of anthropologists in census. Agar aapne nahi dekha, you can actually go back and do that. Those are the interesting new questions coming up. So, keeping these things in mind, we will go ahead, sir. Ye hai, before you write down, because the gentleman was asking about this. You don't write anything as of now. You remember NMS complex? Nature, man, spirit complex. क्या कर रहे थे उधर? Who was giving the, don't write anything please. Who was giving the concept? Vidyarthi was giving. Among which population? Malar. Among the Malar tribe. Bireda annar pusukuna? Among the Malar tribe. And what was he trying to do? Ippudu kuda rasaru. What was he trying to do? So finally, why those three names there, nature, man and spirit? What is it that he is examining in nature? What is it that he is trying to incorporate in man and spirit? Suppose today I give you this question, nature, man, spirit complex, what will you write? You tell me. మా ఇష్టం మేము ఏదైనా రాస్తాం నీకెందుకు రాస్తే రాస్తాం లేకపోతే లేదు హూ ఆర్ యూ I don't know what you have learnt there. Whether you would want to write there or not, that's a different story. That particular concept is very well given in your syllabus. Okay? Sacred complex and NMS complex, these are the two topics given in your syllabus. But this is not given. I feel that somehow Majumdar was neglected by UPSC and Vidyarthi is glorified. True that Vidyarthi's writings are more respected because his focus was very truly on tribe. He didn't try to drift here and there. He was totally dealing with the tribes alone and trying to do rigorous field works and trying to generate his stuff. Sir, आज फुर्सत में you try to read what the book says about LP Vidyarthi, you will find there that he has written tens of books and several others, not less than 30 different books that he has edited. Even if it is an editing of a book, I mean, it's not a small task that he is up to. So about 30 plus books he was editing, more not less than 20 that he was writing. But then his focus was on the tribe, everything that he is trying to get from his fieldwork, whatever concepts he was trying to bring, the concepts were the result of a problem that was presented to him. This you should keep in mind. And he brought them to a proper conclusion and mileage was also given. Sir, everything revolves around how the journals were publishing the articles. If journals are not publishing those documents, your ideas, you will not get that kind of a mileage. In that sense, Vidyarthi got a mileage. See, you may not be writing these things in your exam, sir, please. But you will have to understand this. అక్కడికి వీడికి మైలేజ్ వచ్చింది వీడికి రాలేదు అది కాదనమాట. The problem is, when somebody tries to introduce something new, people may not understand. If I am giving a new concept, people may not understand. See, that day when my son was talking from here, he was giving one hypothetical situation. That your family is there on the other planet, you are on this planet, that planet goes slow and hence you are not getting so aged faster. On the other hand, from the earth you are getting aged and hence at one point, the interstellar story basically. ముందు రోజు చూశాడు ఇక్కడికి వచ్చి చెప్పాడు పెద్ద. But then he understands the whole thing. But when you introduce such kind of a concept, it looks to be absurd. It looks to be absurd. That how is it that, at one point of time you say that you are getting aged, I am not getting aged, and what is the time distance? So this is the time and space distance actually. When you are giving new concepts of this kind, you are treated to be crazy. He was treated like that. First time when you are giving a concept, people may not understand. For example, if I am reading here, he says that, see, one other issue is less people know that Vidyarthi's NMS complex was actually taking this one as a motivation. It was actually having this as the basis. Of course, Vidyarthi was giving that concept as a response to a problem that was offered to him. And Majumdar was not offered any problem to solve. He was out of the blue trying to see. His mission was that I should work on every branch of anthropology, and hence he picked up ecological anthropology. And that's where he gives those. He says there is a human society, there is a geographical area, every geographical area has got certain resources, and whatever you do from the society and from the geography, from whatever resources that you have, these three should work in combination to one another, and from that cooperation comes up the existence of the human, existence, continuation of the resources there. I mean, on this he writes a paper. The problem is the paper is not self-explanatory. Like how most of our scripts in the exam, they are not self-explanatory. We need the writer to be there to explain to us, what is it that was there in your mind? Yeah, there. I started doing your fossil papers. That's where I was feeling. I made it a point that all the questions have to be very simple, very direct, that you must have written many times in the class and discussed. In spite of all that, you have created new fossils in your... That's something incredible, actually. Creating new fossils on the paper, kind of. All my praise goes to you. Write down, sir. We are writing about Dr. D.N. Majumdar. What was his problem-oriented ethnograph? The whole. Sir, if you look at his books, before you write down, if you look at his books, what looks to be the underlying theme? Forget the last one. You may say social anthropology. What looks to be the underlying theme? Like how, when, for example, we had seen the list of books of Fraser. A look at them indicates that he has some USP. We will also try doing that with Vidyarthi. Vidyarthi's many titles, they are to deal with tribe, culture. Achha. When I say Malinowski was his mentor, it should be technically functionalism. But then elsewhere also we have done with Majumdar. We said that he was dealing with those tribes that were experiencing culture contact and change in the culture. That's where the name occurs there, tribe in transition, a fortune of the primitive tribe that goes missing. So he was actually